So good afternoon, everyone. The presenter is Steve Danasko. I work for Greene, Tweed Company in Culpsville, Pennsylvania, 1 mile away from where Joe lives. I see him quite often, unfortunately. I'm an enterprise systems specialist for product lifecycle management for Greene Tweed. I've been working at Greene Tweed for 19 years. I had many different positions within the organization. Global drafting manager, and now was in the IT Center of Excellence for Product Lifecycle Management, and now I am an enterprise systems specialist, where I actually create new developments in SAP with integration into Adept. I was actually the architect for the Adept implementation in 2011. So we're going to go through some of the requirements around that through the presentation. I'd like to introduce my co-presenter, Charlie Smith.
Hello, hello. So I started at Synergis about 18 years ago, and I started in the help desk and quality assurance and testing. And I have recently, over the last year and a half or so, been trained and learning all kinds of interesting things about the application development department, doing the customizations for customers like Greene Tweed, and doing data migrations as well as some Adept integrator work.
Thank you, Charlie. So today we're going to go through a few different bullet points here. The implementation roadmap for Greene Tweed from a product lifecycle management perspective. Some identified problems and issues from our first implementation. Some new Greene Tweed solutions. Synergis custom development, where myself and Charlie worked together to collaborate on what those new custom programs would be. The collaboration that we had to define the requirements. Implementation of those custom properties, some new additional benefits that we reaped from our new customization, and then a roadmap review. So a little bit about Greene Tweed. Greene Tweed is a global organization with facilities in North America, Europe, and Asia. We support many different markets within those areas with aerospace, energy, and semiconductor products. We are a manufacturer high-performance elastomers, as well as advanced engineered thermoplastics and high-performance thermoplastic composite components. So here is our Greene Tweed implementation roadmap. So this started back in 2010 when we actually made the decision to take on Adept. We started with a foundational project with the additional Adept implementation, and really what the point of the roadmap is where were we going to go in 5, 10 years and build this initially so that we could have this scalable as we went through the process and added new document types or new processes within the organization. So back in 2011, we actually did the initial Adept implementation, which I'll go through the specific details of what that implementation was, the requirements, and how we executed that implementation. And then how we leverage that initial implementation to move into other projects, such as our sales opportunity and material add process, which were completed the last 2 years. And then the project I'm working on right now is a global change management process. We have additional processes that we're going to integrate in the future. We don't have a timeline for those, but we have built this so that we can offer those solutions to new functions within the organization. So for our initial implementation, we had specific requirements that actually Adept met. We needed a centralized location or vault to store all of our CAD files with security and access rights. We had to have the capability to update the CAD properties as it went through the workflow. Within the workflow, we had to have specific approval requirements and custom programming to actually populate the individuals that actually completed the approval task, and the dates would populate back to the specific data card, and then eventually, as it goes through Publish Wave to the neutral file format, we'll actually populate those fields on the drawing. We also had a requirement to integrate the resultant PDF files into our SAP environment. So these were links to the drawings as well as creating material masters in the SAP environment. So this is our first implementation, end-to-end process. It's kind of a recap of what I presented 2 years ago. But basically, we're going to go through the initial process and all of the additional Adept plugins or solutions that were out of the box that we could leverage to actually execute all of our requirements.
And so your process kicks off with the CAD drawing being checked into the system.
That's correct. And what that allows us to do, as soon as it's checked into a checked library, it actually initiates the workflow to the individuals associated with the workflow process.
And before my time, Synergis had developed this custom workflow approval for you that places a signature and time stamp on your data card.
That's correct. And basically, there's a little enhancement in there as well. It actually validates the user that upon selecting the approve button, they have to enter their password to validate that they are the user that actually executed that approval process. We also added an additional metadata field that is actually updated as it goes through the process as well, called lifecycle status, which we use later in the process.
And so then the Publish Wave plugin kicks in.
And Joe kind of ruined all my presentation for this here, so thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Thank you, Martha, for allowing him to do that. And then there's the Publish to Adept.
Yeah, the resultant PDF gets checked into Adept.
Yes. And then upon a check-in from that document, we actually use the data exporter.
Yep, which exports your XML format of metadata for you.
So it captures all the metadata associated with the file and allows us to export to the XML file, which then leads into the custom application developed by Greene Tweed. So Greene Tweed has custom developers that actually read in that XML file, and then they will take that XML file and create the document within the SAP environment, as well as the material master. So there was a new material master created, a document info record in SAP, linked together by object links, so users can now access these resultant approved PDF files within the SAP environment. So we realized a few issues as we were going through several years. Some of the identified issues were around SAP DIR link. So whenever the document info record was created within the SAP environment, it actually established a link. And you can look at the link there. It's basically a URL or UNC path directly to the Adept Vault. So what we realized, users that actually had access or had Adobe Acrobat where they could change files or change a PDF, they could actually launch this file, make changes to it, and save it directly back to the Adept Vault. So obviously that is a major risk, and we do have a solution for that, and I'll get into those solutions. When users were actually looking for drawings in the SAP environment, they always had to go and find the specific material master it was linked to. That was the only way you could find a drawing within the SAP environment. In some instances, we had tabulated drawings where it could be used in multiple different materials. And from a methods perspective or our planning perspective, if they're trying to provide quotes to customers, they couldn't find the drawings within this environment. And they did not have access to Adept. When creating a material BOM or an engineering BOM within the SAP environment, it was a very manual process. The user would have to then launch the drawing, copy all the data, and basically manually type that information into the bill of material within SAP. So obviously there's some risks there where users could put in incorrect materials or incorrect quantities. We've had several instances of that because it was manual and had some problems with customers, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. We've also had out-of-sync documents. As I mentioned before, it was a direct link to the Adept Vault. So in some scenarios, users may want to rename the file. If the file was renamed, that link is no longer valid. They would select that, they would get this error right here. If the document or file was deleted, you'd get that same error. In some instances, you could also have multiple documents that were actually out of sync. One was an old one, someone renamed the file, put in the same exact metadata, processed that through the approval process, and now I have two links to two different drawings, one from an old rev and one from a new rev. So obviously that's a risk as well that we could be manufacturing from an invalid or obsolete drawing. So we had to come up with some different solutions for those problems. We needed to copy a PDF file to another watched folder and get that PDF file checked into SAP so it wasn't direct linked back to the Adept Vault. We need to provide searchable data within the SAP environment for users that only use SAP to search for these documents in that environment, and also establish synchronized data. So this will eliminate multiple documents associated with a specific material master. So Joe kind of went through this as well, but basically we had to apply output locations not only for the publish to Adept to check back into Adept, but also to another file share that's watched from another custom program from Greene Tweed to then, instead of add that link, we're going to check in that document into the SAP environment. The configuration for the output locations is actually on a publish wave server in that administration area there, where the other configuration is based on plugins where you can set the configuration for the publish wave requirements. So you can see now it's checked in. It actually has a different name, a storage category for SAP, which is basically a vault within the SAP environment. And then the lock there means that that document is actually checked into the SAP environment. We enhanced the search functionality within SAP by providing additional metadata coming directly from the Adept data card. So as the material masters, or as the document info records are actually being created, we're adding additional data that users can now use to search based on drawing number, revision, title lines, divisions, and some dimensional details that users can now use to actually search for those documents within SAP. Synchronized data. So as I mentioned before, we're using a lifecycle status through our approval process, which actually changes statuses of the Adept data field to then trigger certain activities within the SAP environment. So we have 3 specific lifecycle statuses coming from the Adept data card based on released, ECN pending, and obsolete. And that will allow us to add a status network to the document info record within SAP. So if a user actually pulls up a drawing that states it's status 40 approved, they know they can use that. If there's a status of 89, that we're pending an engineering change, and a status of obsolete if there was a new, either obsoleting that document or adding a new revision of that document. This also allows us to capture version history both in SAP and Adept. So Adept is the bottom version history, and then we have the same type of version history within the SAP environment. So we no longer have any non-synced documents between Adept and SAP. We had a few additional requirements for a new project that I was working on. So some of the requirements were to engage with Charlie and his team to provide some requirements that we needed for a custom development. Our first custom development was around getting the bill of material off the face of a CAD drawing. So I know that that's something that can actually be done manually, one by one, but we wanted this to be an automatic process. So as it went through the approval process, we wanted it to then pull that information or provide that information back to our GT developers. And we wanted the format to be in an XML file.
So we got together and we started talking about this. And at that time, we had a recent release of Adept which offered access to the database through the web API. And if I remember correctly, these customizations we did were the very first customizations that used the web API to read and write to the database. So in terms of the engineering bill of materials from the CAD drawing, we had to decide how are we going to trigger this process. It can't be every single document that gets checked in. And so we put a logical field on the data card, and if that field read yes, that would trigger the process. This particular part was an extension or a plug-in to Publish Wave, which would be able to grab the metadata from the face of the drawing itself, create a PDF for that drawing, as well as then the data exporter would grab the metadata for that file as well, put that into a format that could be read. Both of those would be dropped off in a watched folder, which SAP was configured to watch for, and when that data landed there, it would pick it up and bring it into SAP.
So right there is the configuration. We required a few additional data fields to come through in the XML file. You'll notice up top there's E_PNA. That actually links to our new material add process. So basically, the engineering BOM that comes from SAP, or comes from SolidWorks, actually then goes into our new material add process, and then that XML file is leveraged to create an engineering BOM and a sales and distribution BOM within SAP automatically. The second custom development that we needed to push information from SAP back to Adept. So we wanted some data specifically on a document info record. We wanted to push that data and Greene Tweed was going to provide an XML file to Charlie's team to then develop how they're going to update the data card within the Adept environment.
And so the process this time, as opposed to a Publish Wave extension or plugin, this was a Windows service that we created, which would simply watch a folder. This was configured on the Publish Wave server, so everything was right there, and the service would watch the folder, and once the data would come into it, we would use the Adept file name along with that data to import that key component back into the Adept database. And that's the part that uses the web API to write to the database.
So here's the configuration. Basically, it's an input XML file location that we defined, where Greene Tweed is populating the XML file. It's read in, and then it actually then leverages on the left-hand side over there is the document info record in SAP. You'll see up top ZAS, that's the document type, and then we have a document number. So that is considered our document key within the Adept environment, and it populates the SAP document number on the data card. So this is what actually allows us to do the versioning in SAP as well as in Adept. So with those solutions and some of the other custom development within Greene Tweed, we've realized some additional benefits from all of these new processes. We now populate the material master with some size and dimensional details. This allows the users to use any basic data material fields to actually search for similar products, such as we do a lot of O-rings or T-seals, and get some dimensional details and find something that may be similar and use that as an opportunity to not actually go through all the design activities. We already have something. We can sell it now. In the past, we never had this functionality within SAP, so now outside sales, sales support, anybody in the organization can actually then search for these documents and materials based on that data. When we went through the updates to the opportunity, the sales opportunity processes that we actually enhanced, leveraging a specific, what we call an inquiry number, which is actually an opportunity number. We actually have the inquiry number on the data card, and what this allows us to do to automatically, whenever it goes through and creates the material master and the document info record, is now linked to the inquiry as well. So this allows us to actually close the loop on any opportunities that are out there. In the past, you would actually have to pull down several different spreadsheets from different processes to see if this has actually been ordered. Now we can actually see once it is actually linked to that opportunity, we know that that opportunity has been successful, and we can basically close the book on that and move on to the next opportunity. In our new material add process, that's another PNA number there. This is our material add form. So this is actually defined in SAP. We then leverage that to actually populate data into the material master, or the new material add process. There's an object link, so I can go from a material or a document directly back to that form and get to the drawings from that environment. We also leveraged a few additional values, as I mentioned before, in our first custom program, we actually populate the users, and Mary's back there for the drone by, so just want to point her out. So it actually populates the users and the dates that they were actually approved. We now capture that information in the new material add process. It is now a global process from start to finish, and we can actually capture any Adept metrics within the SAP environment to do reporting instead of pulling data from several different processes, so that in one location we can get all of the metrics that we need. When developing the new material add process, we actually know that a lot of engineers only work within the Adept environment. So they get the workflow, they go through the approval process. And what we did whenever we developed the new material add process in SAP was allow a task assignment to actually assign it to engineering via Adept. What this allows us to do, as soon as those drawings are actually approved in Adept, and it goes through the publish wave and all the processes, it actually then updates the material add process to the new task, so engineering does not have to complete tasks in two different systems. So engineering really loves that.
Saving tons of time here, aren't you?
Trying to. Engineering bill of material data. Basically, what we see here in the material add process, it actually populates that bill of material. Once the material is actually created, the users have a button to actually then click that, create those sales and distribution and engineering BOMs within the SAP environment directly from the XML file that's populated in the material add process. So we no longer have to manually type that information, and no risk of putting in incorrect quantities or materials. So I kind of went through our roadmap. When I started this implementation, I was challenged from my managers to not only look at the initial implementation, but look where we're going to be 2, 5, 10, 20 years from now. Let's build it the way it's going to look in the future and ensure that it's scalable so that we don't have to do major changes, data card changes, add additional fields or data elements. So we actually, my team actually spent a lot of time developing the blueprint on what we needed to do to get to the 10, 20 years in the future. My recommendation for any implementation, from my perspective, is to go small initially and allow it to be scalable, but understand exactly where you're going. Build the tool the way you see it 10, 20 years from now, so that it's not that difficult to add additional processes or additional documents within that environment to ensure that you're in alignment. You can always leverage new and existing functionalities. One of the things that we actually did in the last project is introduced related fields. That allowed us to actually populate data a little more easily and more consistent, which allows us to then map up to specific fields within SAP where there are specific tables that are used for those materials. We use those materials now in related fields based on selections within the data card. So basically, here is the Adept data card when we first implemented on the right-hand side there. And then we have the Adept 2018 data card. You'll notice there are a few additional fields here, but a majority of it is exactly the same. The two key ones that I pointed out here are the P&A number and the inquiry number. We knew those processes were coming. We developed it that way. We didn't use these fields in the first 2 or 3 years, but then we started using them to do the integration into SAP. So users in SAP can actually access all of this data without going into the Adept environment. So basically today I went through our initial Adept implementation, how we executed those requirements and the successful implementation, leveraging a lot of the Adept out-of-the-box solutions such as the data exporter, publish wave, publish to Adept. We provided new enhancements and custom programming to enhance some of the requirements within SAP to eliminate the risks that were there. And had that all situated now. And then additional SAP to Adept integration. And as we're looking at the roadmap, my next process I'm working on now is the global change management process, which will leverage everything that we've already done today from a custom programming, and it's ready to go from the Adept perspective.
And I want to add that the design of these customizations was really a joy to work with Steve on. He's highly technical. He understood the system at a really basic level, right down to the files that are being produced, behind the scenes, what data those files house. He had this thing practically designed when he came to us, and we simply helped him tweak it and make sure that all the technical aspects that he was requiring were really going to be able to be accomplished. So it was a real joy working with you on this.
Well, thank you. And Joe actually, because he's only a mile away, he taught me a lot of that stuff. So.
And that's not to dissuade anybody who has high-level requirements for customizations. We can help lead you down to those nitty-gritty details that need to happen in order to make customizations happen. I just wanted to give you some kudos around the design for this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you for cutting it down 15 minutes for me. So I can pick up more. Any questions? Yes, Todd.
The calculation, so you're transferring tolerance data from Adept to SAP, and then in SAP you're taking that data, making some calculations, filling in some additional data. Did I understand correctly that that is now, that information can be used as either a new revenue stream, or you had existing opportunities, but because the information wasn't there in the system, account reps or sales reps weren't able to leverage that? Did
Correct.
I understand that correct?
Correct,
Yeah.
yes. So we probably have an O-ring with 50 different part numbers that are exactly the same. Just different markets, different opportunities, and nobody realized that we actually had that material or something in that size range.
So you were
now-
duplicating the same product multiple times.
Yes.
And this, seeing all this data up front allows you to see you already have that available, so you don't need to reproduce it.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Huge savings.
Yes. There's a couple here. Yeah.
So you mentioned a couple of challenges with integration with SAP. How did you discover them, and would you consider them, I won't say issues or deficiencies, but were they on the SAP side?
It wasn't on the SAP side because it was a direct link to the Adept Vault. So now everybody had access to that Adept Vault, even though they didn't know they had access to that Adept Vault. So they could actually go in and launch that file and make a change to that file and save it directly back to the Adept Vault.
And that was circumventing the Adept's built-in document control methodology.
So with that said, what was the root cause of the issue? What was the lesson learned from that? Is it a security access issue against the Adept database?
From my perspective, it's the direct link to the Adept Vault.
So it's the integration itself that was problematic.
Yeah, the ability for SAP users to have that path to that document while it resides in the library folder. So SAP was configured to look at that folder that's actually a controlled folder for Adept. So maybe a little bit of an oversight in the implementation,
Okay.
but a resultant ability to fix that.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi. My question for you is twofold. One is in relation to Publish Wave. How does it handle a DWG that's in paper space with multiple sheets? And then the second part of that is with your SAP, taking your XML file, our drawings have an Excel file already that we build our bill of materials with, but only certain people as SAP users can create material masters.
Right.
So did you have the same situation, one, and two, how did you handle it for materials that weren't in there, because these are all new going in to create a material master?
So basically the process in SAP actually goes through a workflow, and then it gets to the point where the engineering bill of material is added to the new material add process. Only users that have access to create materials will execute that task. Now the DWG, I'd have to defer to Joe over here.
So Publish Wave itself has some configuration functionality to help along that way. when submitting the job manually, that first dialogue I showed up there, you can actually get in a drop-down. It will inquire from that, the DWGs you've selected, what are the sheets, and they come up in the drop-down, and you can pick them. So you can say, do everything, do layout 1, do Joe's favorite layout, you know, whatever the names are for each document. Now, if the job is being submitted transparently, then there is a global setting in the publish wave that you configure it, do all layouts, do only, you know, the model space, or do all of the layouts themselves, or do the active layout. And also publish wave, if you tell it to do all layouts and it opens a file and there's only model space geometry, it'll go to layout 1, there's nothing here, so it won't print a blank page. So it only produces the layouts that have geometry and is configured to produce.
One last question. With that as well, we put a watermark on ours.
Mm-hmm.
Can you position the watermark in publish wave, or is it always in the center?
You can position it as long as you always want it in the center. We're hoping to change that, but right now it's centered.
So, and I'm a little murky on the timeline. So have you guys upgraded Adept since doing a lot of the customization? And I guess related to that, either did you find that there was added complexity to the upgrade because of it, or do you anticipate it, I guess, if you haven't done so?
We upgraded to 2017, and then that's when we engaged with basically they're using the API web for calls for the
And so
custom programming now.
you've done incremental updates within the 2017 family, but you haven't
Yep.
done a major upgrade
Correct,
yet.
yeah. Since this changed. Does that answer your question?
So I guess I'm just curious if, compared to using out of the box, were the upgrades considerably more difficult or complex because you had the customization, I guess?
No, I didn't see any issue with that at all, no.
In terms of service packs, it's really seamless. When it comes to actually upgrading to 2018, there will be a refactoring of the customizations to make sure it's all compatible, reading the correct database tables, writing the correct database tables. So,
But we also do have a development, a quality, and a production, so we test in development first and then move to quality. Any custom programming changes, anything from upgrading service packs or even to new versions. I highly recommend that. We learned our lessons.
Hi, Steve. Just a general question. How many locations, therefore possibly servers, do you employ in your network? And who manages them? And last of all, is there one at Joe's house?
So, I think he's on our Wi-Fi at work a lot, but I don't know. So the first one was how many servers?
How many servers or locations are they employed in? Because like in our company, we're spread out throughout the United States, things like that, and sometimes bandwidth is an issue. So we have to look at configuration and
Right, so we have
networking.
we have different servers in different locations. Basically, we have a hub here in Pennsylvania, and then we have vaults down in Houston, in Singapore, and in the UK. We also have AFS, which we drove. That was one of our requirements initially, so that's why you have AFS now. So we have that replication. So basically, we only have 4 servers, and then the Adept server, so 5.
And they're sharing their licenses across time zones and geographies, and the AFS helps them because they're sharing across 3 continents. They're able to really optimize their investment licenses.
Well, in line with that, are you the single person who then maintains all these different servers, or is it
IT, yeah.
location, or?
It's actually IT, client services. Yeah. So I don't manage that, no. Not anymore, let's say. I did before.
Actually, a question for Joe.
Is he still
the
on?
microstation integration ever comes to pass? Or we also get a published wave supported microstation?
They're both on the table. As Todd said earlier, we don't have them in the roadmap at this moment, but, yeah.
One we get the other, right?
Well, no, they would both be separate development efforts. There's, you know, the CAD integration side of MicroStation, then there's MicroStation support by Publish Wave. Right now, there's activity level is kind of bumped up a little bit in both those areas for us. So, you know, that raises the priority for the time being, but there's no commitment at this point in time.
Fair enough, thank you.
I hear that's a want though, right?
Oh, yeah, I mean, and with the CAD integration,
Right.
you know you're gonna want low.
Yep. Understood.
Here's the cool thing. Keep talking about it, keep bringing it up, it's up to you now. But you heard Steve say that everybody who uses AFS, which is the vault replication, Greene Tweed, our agreement with Greene Tweed drove that capability. So Greene Tweed and Steve specifically are directly responsible for that. I.e., you can make a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Karen Dawes, Fluid Components. You made a lot of this is very similar, and my IT guy didn't want to link to our Adept Vault. So when we publish, we go P2A on final approval, P2A, and then we actually publish another copy out to a network location. So, and then within our ERP system, if this folder equals that 6-digit file name, then it automatically looks into that location. So with yours, is it a network location or is it internal into SAP?
It's stored in SAP.
Okay, and then obviously you did your custom programming with regards to it also keeping the versions as well, because
Yes.
ours is, you know, once you final approve Rev B, it replaces Rev A in that folder. So there's only always just one current in our
Right.
network location.
Yes, so what we did, because we're creating the document in SAP, we have version history in SAP as well. So that's why that document key, custom program was key. So we use that, and if that document, they find that document, it versions the document in SAP and actually obsoletes the previous one.
That was some of your custom
That
programming
was
that
some
you
of-
guys did.
Yes.
The question's kind of more for Joe. Knowing
Can I
kind of web services, API output for Publish Wave, is it there now like natively, or is it on the roadmap to be able to output to external web services? Meaning you needed to send information about a particular drawing to a third-party manufacturer who's making something for you. You hold the rights to that the CAD file itself, but you may need to send them bits and pieces of information to their own web services to ingest. So Publish Wave would handle that push.
Wow. I'm not quite, I fully understand the question. Todd, can you help me out
Yeah,
here?
sure. So on an event, you're broadcasting or sending information, a packet of information directly to somebody else's endpoint.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. So that, Publish Wave doesn't do that today, and it's something it could do. So if that's a value add and something that folks are interested in, we should have a discussion.
Adept integrator could probably do that too.
I was just going to say that. Yep.
Thank you, yep. He's looking for a web service. That's a great use for integrator.
A final question? Yeah.
As far as the road mapping goes, what process did you guys use as far as determining which part of your company you're going to bring in next? And secondly, can we have Joe's address?
So basically, the first implementation was all about CAD. That's really what it was, and we needed to find a way to get the information into SAP. And then we knew that we had all these other projects, so we went through actually ASAP methodology to build the business blueprint, and then identify what was coming on in the future as future processes. We knew that if you look at the data card, we knew that those processes were coming in the next 5-10 years. So we know that there are some other ones that we have additional data fields already there, that some we can populate now, and then whenever we migrate some of the data, we can also populate that information.
All right, thank you guys.
Yep.